if you want to convince someone of an agenda, there's probably no better tool than a film camera. It can be the most compelling argument on our planet. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and wallop people on the head with your point of view. That's often when people switch off. I think that if you can do it, first of all, through story, and again, story has to be the trump card, but also if you can let viewers believe they've come to these conclusions on their own, they've come to the conclusions you have as a filmmaker, and you can present it in a way that at least appears objective, then it's more powerful because audiences feel like they've come to their own conclusions. And also I think there's something to be said for giving the opposing view, giving the opposing perspective some relevance as well within your film, whether you believe in it or not. Any filmmaker who says they're completely objective is full of bullshit. You know, they're kidding you or they're kidding themselves. Now that's not to say that I think that it's admirable to try to be as objective as possible, and to also to let the audience know when you have a point of view, to relay that through the techniques that you're using in the film, to be aware that you have a perspective and then go about convincing the audience of your point of view. I don't have the same skill set as Michael Moore, where he can have a very rigid agenda and then go about in actually a very, you know, depending upon what you think about Michael Moore, you can't argue with the fact that he's great. He forms great arguments and entertaining arguments. I'm not that kind of filmmaker. I would rather try to approach it in a more objective manner, but I will always have a perspective, and where I decide to put the camera is going to dictate how you feel about it as a viewer. I'm often cutting while I'm shooting, and I think that that's also something that younger filmmakers aren't aware of, that to know what you need when you go out and shooting the next time, if you've cut together what you've, I mean, obviously you're not going to cut the whole film together, but if you're cutting as you go, you know what you need. And often when we get finished with the last shoot, I'm finishing the very last shoot for a feature documentary in 2 days. That film is more or less cut and waiting for that last scene to be put in. Another thing that surprises young filmmakers is how clear a vision I have going into a project. I have always an idealized version of what that film looks like, and that even includes where the story starts, what the middle looks like, what the end will look like. You know, with my first film, it was like, here's a Native American basketball team. I know that will cover one season and they'll win the state championship. That was my idealized version, and that the players will encounter these difficulties along the way. Well, it didn't work out exactly that way, but by and large, you have to be proactive as a documentary filmmaker. You're not just a tabula rasa, just there documenting things. You have to actively know the story that you're looking to get. And of course, when life hands you a different story, you have to be reactive to that. But if you don't have an idealized version of what the film is, then I don't think you have a business picking up a camera. Life is always more interesting than you plan it to be. And things happen in front of your camera that if you wrote them, people wouldn't actually believe it. That's the beauty of documentary film. And so you do have to be quick on your feet and able to react when life presents you these gems. But at the same time also you have to be aware of classic storytelling structure, and if life doesn't present itself as a clearly delineated story, which of course it never does, your job is to interpret life and the truths that you perceive and present them to the audience in a palatable way. I've done a mixture of feature work and shorts. I'm just finishing my 4th feature documentary, you know, I've been fortunate to be nominated twice for shorts. Now those are really kind of medium format films in the 40-minute range. I think short films, they do, you can take a little more artistic liberty in how you structure those films, but they do still have to have sort of a classic structure. You know, they do have to have a beginning, a middle, and end. You still have to pay attention to, you know, what I consider classic storytelling techniques. I think that for aspiring documentary filmmakers, sometimes they don't remember that you have to be first and foremost a storyteller. You're not just a documenter of things. You are telling a story. And so You really let the story speak to you on what its length will be, but then you have to use traditional storytelling conventions to tell that. I always do my own interviewers, unless I'm co-directing the film, which I've done a lot of lately. And in that case, we'll sort of double team and decide who's going to sit in the chair first. And in some ways, you can even be good cop, bad cop your subject, just to have a different tact and approach to elicit different responses. But in general, I like to interview, again, like I said, you have to have an idealized version of the story ahead of time and then react when it doesn't follow that way. You also have to have an idealized version of how you would like the answer to the question to come at you. And if you, it's not that you dictate what people say, but if you can phrase the question a certain way or redirect people when necessary to make that answer concise and also hit on the most important, resonate emotionally and informationally, if that's a word, to the audience, that's your job as a director. I'm often asked how you get people to open up, and frankly, I continue to be surprised by how open people are, even people from developing countries with a language barrier and you know, from disadvantaged communities. I think people recognize the power of the camera, and I think that people generally, even in these far-flung corners of the planet, are media savvy and understand that this camera is a tool to get their message out to the world. And so, obviously, certain people are more natural on camera than others. There's some people who are just never going to be good on camera, but I'm continually surprised how normal people articulate themselves so well when they're talking about themselves and the things that they're passionate about.